All right, again, we're going to attempt to see if we can finish this. I know some of you are coming up with errors. You know, again, if you want it, I'll be more than willing to put my project, when I get all done with it, to go and put it on the on a flash drive and pass it around. Again, you'd have to change the name of your database from Sports Store, if that's what you've got, to Sports Store 44, which is what I use, but other than that, I would think it would work. So again, we're on the bottom half of page 236, where the author says, we've now reached the final customer feature in the Sports Store, the ability to check out and complete an order. So notice, we will extend the domain model to provide support for capturing the shipping details from a user and add application support. All right, so the first thing we want to do is go back into our sportsstore.domain project. So I'm going to close the UI for now and open up the domain project. All right. And we are to come in here and open up the entities folder. All right, and add a class called shippingdetails.cs to the entities folder. So there's our entities right there. Right mouse click, add class. Right mouse click in the entities folders, add class, shippingdetails.cs. I'm going to replace the current contents with what's on page 236 and 237. All right, so I'm just going to grab all this stuff, remove it, and replace it with what's down here. Notice we've got data annotations. You already know what those are. All right, and then on 237, add the rest of this. You know, the other thing too is, you know, be really cognizant. I'm not trying to waste my time or your time telling you this, but make sure that you have error messages that wouldn't turn off a user. Does that make sense? You never want to talk down to somebody. All right. I had a student years ago. This is gonna. I'm not swearing, but it'll almost sound like a swear word. And we got to this kind of a part, and in his messages, he would put something like, please enter a name, dickweed. You know, and you don't do stuff like that. Seriously, you just don't. I don't care if it's for an assignment or whatever. You know, if you bury something like that in there and you put it in a bunch of places, I removed all of them. But if you don't remove it from one and somebody ever sees your code, again, that's how you get remembered. All right? So you'll notice in here we have what? We've got a name. Probably would be better as two names, but that's fine. All right, first address line right here. All right, second address line, third address line, it looks like. I'm just going to put a blank space in between each one of these. Then a city name, a state name, a zip code, a country name, and whether or not we want gift wrapping. So this is all the stuff that we're going to have in here. Now, the author makes a real big thing of this, but I want you to please look up on the screen. What he's going to end up doing is he's going to end up using these names for his field names. Is that a big thing? Well, he doesn't like the fact that it's line 1 instead of line space 1, that it's line 2 instead of line space 2. So after we do this, he's going to show you how to change that. It's not a big thing, except it's going to be another data annotation. All right? So if you don't like this, and think about it. We've got zip. If the field was called zip, but for whatever reason you wanted it to be called zip code on the label, you could change that. And that's what the author is going to talk about in just a couple minutes. All right? I didn't mean to belabor it, but I just wanted you to hear that. So it says you can see I'm using validation attributes. Since we're using all those, of course, you need on the previous page, you need that using statement. All right? Enough said. We talked about it several times. Now, the shipping details class does not have any functionality, so there is nothing to be unit tested. Well, that's always good news for you guys. All right, adding the checkout process then. I'm on the bottom of page 237. It says the goal is to reach the point where users are able to enter their shipping details and submit their orders. To start this off, we need to add a Checkout Now button to the cart summary view. That should make sense because, as I said previously, we now can add things to our cart, we can remove things from our cart, but when we're done, we can't do anything with the things that are in our cart. All right? So the author is applying a change here toward the bottom of page 237 to the index.cs HTML file. All right? So right underneath where we've got a hyperlink that says continue shopping, we want to add this. All right? So I want to go back to that index file, and I got a lot of stuff open here. Looks like it's there. All right. All right, so right down here near the bottom where we've got, I'm in my index.cs HTML file. All right, for my carts in the index.cs HTML file. That's in the web UI, sorry. So we want to add this line. What line is that? That's going to be the line that's right here that's going to say checkout now, and it'll force the checkout method to be called. It's going to be a button with a class of primary, so I think it's bluish in color. All right. So as the author mentions then at the bottom of the page, this will generate a link that we've styled as a button. So now next to our continue shopping, we'll have a checkout now, if everything works as expected. All right. Now, it's not going to work yet, but I'm going to run it anyway. All right, so now when I add that to my cart, okay, looks like it's funky right now, but at least I do have this checkout now. All right, it's not going to work right now, but I wanted to make sure that it was put in there. Could I have missed something? Of course I could have. All right. So the author says, as you might expect, I now need to define the checkout method in the cart controller class. So again, back in our system, or I'm sorry, in our sportscore.webui, we're going to need to go into our cart controller class and add this at the very bottom. All right. The checkout method returns the default view and passes a new shipping details object to the view model. To create the view, we want to right mouse click on checkout and choose add view. We've done this many times before. All right, checkout is fine. Just click OK or click add. All right, not much in here. The code that we'll need takes up all of page 239. And there's some on 240 as well. All right. It's giving me some errors. I'm hoping that they're going to end up reconciling themselves momentarily. We'll see. All right. For each of the properties of the model, in other words, for each field that we just put into here, we've created a label and an input element formatted with Bootstrap so that it looks decent. All right. It says you can see the effect by starting the application, clicking the checkout button, and then it should look something like this. We looked at this before. All right. Do a save all, and I'm going to try to run it. I might get errors from this stuff. I don't know. All right, add to cart. I've got to fix that. That's got to be moved down. But checkout now. Is it going to show me? Or is nope. All right. It says an error occurred. An expression tree may not contain a dynamic expression, so it does not like this. Let's go back and take a look. Somehow I don't have my model statement up at the top here. All right. Got rid of most of my errors here. It doesn't like this right here that says text box 4, but again, it may fix itself, it may not, but I'm going to go back in and I'm going to try to go into my views from the other project. And for cart, I want to see if I can run this from my index. There we go. Everybody see it? All right. Now, something is hinky here. That's just a positioning thing. I'll have to figure that out. I'm not going to worry about that. All right. But when I do click checkout now, and this is what I want you to see, is just so you know, by default, notice if I come in here, I can put this in, and boom, it'll fill out everything for me. There's an autocomplete that by default, once you fill in a form once, unless you turn it off, you won't have to be entering that stuff in again. So I can do that. All right, click complete order. It's not telling me anything. It's just basically sends me back again. All right. And I didn't even know whether or not to talk about this, but I want to say this to you. Next week, when we start doing this other project, okay, it's going to seem in so many ways so much more simplistic than this one, because we're not going to have interfaces. I'm trying to strip it down, so it maybe isn't following best practices. There's things that maybe I should be doing that I'm not, but I'm more concerned with you understanding every facet of what's going on in the project. All right, where I think with a lot of, sometimes with this author, some of the stuff that's in here leaves a little bit to the imagination almost. All right. So when I did run it then, I got this. You may have gotten it. You may not have gotten it. All right. But the author says here, the problem with the view in its current form is there's a lot of repeated markup in here. And that's true. There really and truly is a lot of repeated markup in there. All right. So the author says what would be nice would be to be able to get rid of some of that stuff. So look on the screen, please. So he cut that down by putting in a for each statement. This is where the problem occurs, because what he ends up doing in here is he ends up using the field names. So if you had, and remember those field names have to be one word. So if you had a field name that was named zip code and you wanted it to be zip space code, it wouldn't work currently. All right, and we'll talk about how you'd fix that in just a couple minutes, because it's really and truly not that big a thing. I mean, I think he made kind of a big thing out of this. All right. So in the checkout here, what he says is we should replace what we had with this, and this is from that H2 on, so that's from right here on. Again, I'm just following his lead. In fact, what I'll do is I'll take what is in here that I know works, and I'll just comment it out. And then I'll put the new one in there. All right. Notice I have no errors now. There is nothing that says that it's in error. So I'm going to save, try to run it again from the index, and it should look the same when I come in here. And it does. Okay. All right. I love this because the author says here on the bottom of 242, the for and if keywords I have used are within the scope of a razor expression, so you in the at using, so you don't need to prefix them with the at sign. It says, in fact, if I were to do so, Razor would report an error. It can take a little while to get used to it, but it becomes second nature to most programmers. That's true. I mean, if that's all you're doing all day long is programming this stuff, a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now becomes second nature. All right. So the author says we're not quite there yet. If you look on 243, this is what he doesn't like. He wants us to say line space 1, line space 2, line space 3. So he wants a space character between the word line and the associated number. All right? And he said the reason we've got this problem is that we're using the property names. And as he mentions here on page 243, property names don't always make good labels. All right? That's why he says let's fix those by putting a display name in there. See this? So what we want to do is we want to go back to our entity that we created and add this display line before all three of them. So in other words, we want to go back into here and in the shipping details that's right here, we want to go in and before we've got required, but we can add another annotation. That one that says display name equal line space 1. This one will say display name equal line 2. And the last one will say display equal line 3. So he has you make those changes. And if we do that, and then we jump back again, and we run it one more time, should do a file save all just to be sure. All right. And we again view this in the browser. It's just another data annotation. If this works, what the author is saying is we'll now have line space 1, line space 2, and line space 3. And if you were thinking, who really cares? Definitely the author does. I think it was his chance to show you more data annotations if indeed you wanted to use them. All right. So see this? See how there's a space between the word line and the number 1 and the number 2 and the number 3. All right? Seems to me like that was a lot of work for that. That's what he wanted. That's what he's got. All right. I don't know if this would help to put a BR tag in there or not. But we'll see. All right. And he mentions here the example shows two different aspects of working with MVC. The first, you can work around any situation. Second is, even if you've got a role that views play, if they're restricted, Razor kind of gives you an out. You may agree with that, you may not agree. All right? Okay, now we've got that. We've got that form, but right now the form isn't going anywhere. We want to set it up so that the form goes where we want it to go. In other words, in my case, I want the form to go to that folder I put on the desktop that was called orders. Right now it's not doing that. So it says we need a component in the application which can handle the details of the order for processing. All right? And he says in keeping with what he's been doing, he's going to define an interface for this functionality, write an implementation of the interface, and then associate the two using the DI container ninject. All right? Good news is we're almost done with the chapter. Bad news is, yeah, but there's still 10 pages. So add a new interface to the abstract domain folder that's called IO order processor. right, I/O order processor. The contents are shown here on the top of page 245. So now that we've got this interface set up, and again, interfaces by default always start with the letter I, as the author is showing there. All right. So the implementation of the order interface is going to deal with orders by emailing them to site administrators. Please look at the top of the screen here. This is the three things that are important are here, here, and here. I guess 4 things, and there. So this says, who's doing the emailing? That's us. This supposedly is going to the administrator. All right. This is a server name, and this is where we want those emails to end up. All right. Now, a couple things about this. It's not real life. All right. And what I mean is, yeah, you would want something like that probably to happen, but you'd probably want to throw that order into a database as opposed to just email it to an administrator. What if somebody makes a really big order and if for some reason your email is down? I mean, couldn't that happen? Happens here. Then the administrator might not even know there's an order. So it's not that there's anything wrong with it, per se, all right? But they could have probably done it and made it a little bit better, for lack of better words. So the code for the interface is on 246 and the top of 247. So we want to come in and create a new class file in the concrete folder. All right? I know I keep telling you, look up here and do whatever, but I do want you to understand the way this guy has set this up. In his abstract folder, he puts interfaces. Interfaces cannot physically be created. They can't be instantiated, nude, whatever you want to say. I mentioned this before. If I wanted to say person, Jeff, equals new person, something like that, I could not do that with one of these. Because when you've got an interface like that, it is not literally possible for you to instantiate. So I have to do it with a regular class. The reason I'm mentioning this is he puts his interfaces in an abstract folder. He puts his classes in a concrete folder. All right? So he wants us to open up that concrete folder. And in that concrete folder that you see right here, that's the interface. But we want to come into here. We want to right mouse click in here, choose add, and choose class. The name of the class is supposed to be email order processor. All right, there it is. I'm going to remove everything that's there and replace it with all the stuff that he gave me. Please look on the screen, okay? I'm hoping that gets fixed in a second, but I'm not worried about it. This right here, if you have been keeping up and you want to make sure you can see yours, you have to put the path to that folder. You have to create a folder someplace on your system, and you've got to give a path to that folder. Does that make sense? This won't work otherwise, because otherwise it's sending it out into cyberspace. All right? So with mine, There it is. All right. There's my path right there. C:\users \Rankin \desktop \orders. So I'm going to go into mine here, and I'm going to replace that path with my path. All right. And then down at the bottom here, there is some more code on the next page that is on the top of page 247. So I already put this code in. I explained what that code was to you. All right? No, I didn't. So this is email order processor file, and the code is on 245, 246, it looks like, and the top of 247. 245, all of 246, and the top of page 247. This is a big file. Not even 100 lines, it just seems like it's humongous. But again, you're going to have to change that on yours. All right, it's my line 18. Hopefully it's the same one for you. Okay? All right. So he says he defined the email settings class as well, an instance. Yeah. It says, don't worry. Normally this wouldn't work. He's basically using a lot of defaults. Okay? All right. Middle of page 247. Registering the implementation. We're ready for a break soon. All right. Now that we have an implementation of the iOrder processor interface and the means to configure it, we can use ninject to create instances of it. I promise you, no ninject in the project we'll be doing. All right? I mean, one of the reasons that I'm doing this is I want to be able to explain stuff to you and have you say, oh, that's what that was. All right? And hopefully it'll make sense. All right. So we want to go into that ninject dependency resolver file that's in our infrastructure folder in our web UI. All right? Say that again. I want to go back and open up in web UI. All right. I want to go into my infrastructure folder, and I want to open up the ninject dependency resolver. Once we do that, we want to add a using statement, and in particular, the using statement that is shown in bold on page 247. All right. Then we want to jump down into our add bindings that you see right here that we have right now. All right. That must be old, so I'm going to get rid of that. All right. And under that kernel.bind, we are to add the code that is shown on page 248 right here. All right. And then the author explains underneath it, it says, I created an email settings object which is used so that we can inject it into the email. It's making all the stuff talk. It's making sure the interface can communicate with the class. All right? So we have to make one more change here. We have to go into our web config file, and this is the main web config file, not the web config file that's in views, but the one on the very bottom of our program, right down here at the bottom. We have to open that, and in our app settings, all right, go down to the bottom, right before the ending app settings tag, paste in that. Email.radius file, value equal true. All right, it's the same code that's shown 2/3 of the way down on page 248. Okay? To complete the cart controller class, we need to modify the constructor so that it demands an implementation of the iOrder processor interface and add a new action method which will basically handle it. All right, so we want to make the changes here that are shown in the book on page 249. The good news is after this, 250 and 251, that's a unit test, so that's something hopefully you're going to try. And then we just have to add a little validation and we're done. All right. So I'm just going to grab the whole thing. Well, the author says you can see that the checkout action method we added is decorated. In other words, they put the HTTP post around it, meaning it'll be invoked for a post, in this case, when you submit the form. All right? Back to here, file, save. All right. So notice, bottom of 249, the MVC framework checks the validation constraints, using the data annotation attributes. Any problems it finds are passed to the action method. We already know this. That's when we check the model state .isValid property. Okay, but what we want to do, if you look up on the screen here, because this is almost the end, is we want to display validation errors. What? We want this. When something doesn't work, we both want the errors. That's a validation summary in red. Plus, we want every field that's not filled in or that is filled in incorrectly to change so that it is pink in color. All right? And that's just about the last thing that we're told to do in here. All right? The good news is there really and truly isn't much to do for it. So we want to go into the checkout.cshtml file and add the validation summary right there. Okay. And it says the next step is to create some CSS styles. This is what's going to make it pink and red, etc. So in we want to create another file called errorstyles.css and put this stuff in there. So I'm going to come back, and in my web UI, in my content folder, I'm going to right mouse click on the content folder, choose add, new item, and we want style sheet. I don't remember where that is, but maybe I can search for it. Okay, well, just style sheet. No, it doesn't want that either. All right, it's in here. I'll just have to look for it, that's all. Okay, looks like it's under web markup style sheet right here. Okay, and they want us to call this error styles .css, remove what's in there and put in this. All right, there's the file error styles.css. What we do have to do, though, this should make sense to everybody, is you have to open up your underscore layout file, and we've got to add that. Okay, so there's our styles file right there. We can do it probably before or after. I don't think it'll matter. They show it on the very bottom, right after the theme. All right, file, save all, and I'm going to try to build it. Lovely. That summary here was not found. That was what I just put in there. All right, I'll have to take a look at that. While I take a look at that, anybody else has got any problems, fine, I'll try to help you with them. But what I'm going to do is, if we get this working after this chapter and the next chapter, like I said, I'll throw it on a flash drive. Anybody who wants it can take a look at it. All right, that's fine with me. I'm going to see if I can fix this. So it's 2:30. Let's come back, please, at 2:45.